First of all, welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're pretty excited about this one. Talking about Klepierre, a Sitecore journey to the Jamstack. So just a couple of housekeeping items as we get started. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. So after the webinar, we'll send out an email with a link to the recording and some, if any resources get mentioned, we'll send out links to those. So keep an eye out for that. In addition, there's going to be a Q&A today. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A widget in your Zoom, kind of like your Zoom features. And in addition to that, we'll be keeping an eye on chat. So feel free to drop your questions in there. We'd love to answer them. If you have questions about this webinar, definitely feel free to reach out to Sarfraz here at Netlify, and that's his email address right there. We will be sending that out in the email after the presentation as well. Let's see here. If you are looking to use Netlify at your company, then there's a link there that says get in touch with us. That'll get you in touch with some of our experts who would be happy to talk to you about whatever project you're working on. And then if you're an agency and you're interested in working with Netlify, there's a link here to our agency partners page that also has a contact us option. So you can get connected directly into our agency folks who would love to talk with you. So with that out of the way, I would love to, we're going to run a quick poll. The question in the poll is, what is your biggest pain point for your websites? Or rather, this is my bad, I did not put the right question in. It says, the real question is, what is the biggest change you'd like to see on your websites in 2021? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll live. It'll be in your poll widget, your Zoom poll widget. And we will release the results of that poll at the end, right before we do Q&A. So with that out of the way, I would love to tell you a little bit about our speakers. So, to kick it off first, Sarfraz Raidan. He's our Director of Global Partners here at Netlify. He works with technology and business leaders, helping companies reach customers better by using Jamstack web architecture. He uses his technical and operational expertise to help these companies serve new markets and to approach technology decisions with clear business outcomes in mind. So we're happy to have him here and have him hosting. For our other panelists today, Zyad Rujeedawa. He is the Global VP of Engineering at Proximity. He started his career as a web developer and is now the technical director at Proximity. He specializes in building very large, scalable, and highly performant web applications for big brands. He focuses on using the right frameworks, architecture, and CMS, coupled with the right cloud infrastructure setup. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Jonathan Bobo. He's been working with Proximity since 2012 and as CTO since 2016. He's been supporting marketing and digital teams to set up major platforms for international clients such as Procter & Gamble or Mars. He's a MarTech expert with increasing focus on key marketing technologies such as Salesforce or Adobe, but is also a supporter of best-of-breed applications which leverage APIs and new generation software. So yeah, excited to have these folks presenting for us today. And then finally, just as an overview, both Jonathan and Zyad from Proximity, which is an agency that has more than 40 plus certified Sitecore developers, in addition to do in-house Sitecore MVPs. So they definitely know what they're talking about. So with that said, just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. We'll be talking about some of the core questions for Klepierre that got them started on this path, how Proximity helped them execute on the vision that they came up with, the impact that Jamstack had in conjunction with Sitecore for Klepierre, and then what were the outcomes and impacts that this project had for the business. At which point we'll move into Q&A, and that's the plan for today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to our presenters.
All right. Thank you, Nate, for the introduction. So hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Bobo, as Nate said, and today I'm going to start talking about the project that we did with Klepierre together with Zyad and the rest of the team. So let me quickly start talking about Klepierre just a little bit. So Klepierre is a leader of shopping centers. Actually, they do the real estate for shopping centers in Europe, and they actually own more than 150 shopping centers. And when Klepierre decided to build a new digital platform, it was not only about delivering a digital platform to serve the 98 website that you see listed here, at least identified here. It's not just about the 98 website. It's not neither just about feeding the 250 million users they have in their database, but actually when they were looking to build this new platform, it was really to actually leverage the content they have and the data which is generated by their users to feed not only the online channel, but also the offline. So they are actually looking at feeding the 1.1 billion visitors they have in store with all this content and data. This is really like the ambition that they had. So as Proximity, when we look at a platform like this, what we pull together is a set of skill sets, of different skill sets, which match the ambition, right? So of course there is the content aspect of things, being able to deliver a content platform at scale. There is the technology aspect of this, using the right technology to make it happen. But there is also the data aspect, which is in their case extremely important, and we'll see about that a bit later. If we look at what a platform like the platform for Klepierre looks like, it is indeed about pushing content on the web, things like news, things like shopping center information, opening hours, etc. But it's also about capturing the data that comes out of everyone's visit, of course, but also the data which is generated by people registering to the platform, but also by people coming to the shopping centers. So this is where it becomes very interesting for them. Of course, they have a full-fledged CRM platform behind it to actually communicate with the people who actually get into the database. And on top of that, there is a whole aspect of personalization. And we're talking personalization not only on the website, we're talking personalization as well within the emails, etc. So this is the kind of ambition that they have. And of course, all this has to happen at scale. As we said at the beginning, on the digital aspect of things, we are talking about at least 98 plus websites. And actually, this platform is going further because it's a platform which is actually expected to have mobile apps, again, about 100 of them, etc. And all of that, and a chatbot, by the way, and all of this has to be fed by this whole concept of having content and data flowing together flawlessly across the whole ecosystem. So when we have a platform like this at hand, usually, there is already a lot of challenge on the technical aspect of things, doing the right budget for the platform build, the right budget for the creative build, etc., the rollout, the maintenance. But in the case of Klepierre and Proximity, the relationship that we have is that actually Proximity, we have to look at the whole aspect of cost, including things like license and infrastructure budget. And this is where, as an agency, we have to start being a bit creative in the way that we want to address that. We want to make sure that as we are looking at a platform which has to be, to have a kind of a fixed budget for maybe the next 3 years, we need to be a bit creative in where we choose the technology, and we need to think through how it will evolve across these 3 years, especially if we are looking at in a SaaS context, in a SaaS world that we are today, things like license costs, which may evolve, and things like infrastructure costs, which is actually a big challenge to be able to predict how much this is going to impact the budget across the rest of the years. So this is where we had to rethink about how we would address the architecture aspect of things. And I'm going to let Zyad talk to you about this one, because this is where we actually got Jamstack to come into play. Zyad, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So for all those who know Sitecore, right? So basically, the idea was to go full-fledged, right? Sitecore out of the box headless. Okay, so Sitecore, they have like 5 configuration mode to do headless. Okay, but to do scale, Sitecore themselves. So we contacted Sitecore to see how we should architect the platform to host the 96 sites, 96 plus sites, right? So what they propose to us is what you're seeing on the screen that we highlighted in green. So the connected mode, right, is the least performant one, I would say, and not being used on production, obviously. So this one was used by our local team, right? So our developer team, connected mode, Sitecore is hosted locally on the machine, right? For the content management, so the CM, it was integrated mode, right? So it's not like separated with the CD or those kind of stuff. So it's still kind of a connected mode, but it's on CM, okay? And it's hosted on Sitecore, and it does server-side rendering for previews and stuff like that. So the most important one that concerned us was how do we scale the CD environment, right? So the content delivery. So what Sitecore recommended us was to go for a server-side rendering mode, okay? So we have one CD, right, per market, and then it serves it and gives the API, and then we on our end we just build a site in the front-end technology we want. Okay, so this was the initial thought, right? And we even started setting it up, right? So once we started it up, we started to hit some hiccups, right? So next slide, Joe, please. So we found out quite quickly, though, right, that we have an infrastructure issue. Okay, so what does this mean? With the headless approach, and that's not only Sitecore, by the way, right? With 96 sites in Sitecore, okay, we needed to have 96 Azure web apps, okay, very distinct Azure web apps to be able to serve each headless site. Okay, so this was going to be a terrible headache for us, right? Imagine managing 96 web apps for one market, okay, and then how it's kind of impossible, right? And to manage such things. The second thing that we hit quite soon, and even before going to production, is high CPU usage, right? On the production on the production environment, but without big traffic coming in. So right out of the bat. We optimized all our Sitecore queries, right? All our caching were there. But still, with the amount of pages we had, with the amount of site that was hitting, we had high CPU usage. And this was coming basically from the JSS. So JSS is the JavaScript framework for Sitecore, right? So for headless. So it was coming from the JSS layout service, okay? So we thought with Sitecore that it was basically when Sitecore was doing the server-side rendering and converting the JSON to the HTML, right? So this was a big issue for us and was a big no-no, right, for the target that we set us to reach, right? So the time to market, managing the whole infrastructure, the performance was a big issue. And we had to react very fast. So even if we started on the platform already, so we had to think differently to see how what do we bring forward to solve those two issues. Next slide, Joe. So, and then we hit Jamstack, right? And basically we started with Jamstack, not from a performance standpoint, but most from a cost standpoint, from a cost infrastructure standpoint, okay? But then we quickly found out that we could leverage Jamstack full-fledged and bring us super performance, scalability and high security, right? Because your security is reflected. So your database, which is static. So your site which is static doesn't have a database connectivity, right? So you are quite secure, I would say, but right. We will talk about Jamstack further in the webinar. I just wanted to mention it here. Okay. So the next slide, I'll just briefly explain the very high level architecture and tools that we use to bring this up. Okay, so one of the things that's important to Jamstack is the static generation of a page, right, of the content. Okay, and this one is very important. So what we did, right, so starting from the far left on the screen, we still had Sitecore GSS, okay, built on top of React. So we have React.js there. We have our content management, our CM, okay, it's still there. It's still on Sitecore, sitting on Sitecore Platform as a Service, so the PaaS of Sitecore. We opted for PaaS so that our developers could really focus on the development part of stuff, right? Not on the infrastructure, because setting up the infrastructure of Sitecore at scale, right, can be challenging and complex, especially the maintenance of it, right? The configuration, the publishing instance, the solo instance, right? So all those can be quite hectic, okay? And the whole static generation, the build, I would say, which will come to more detail later on. So we use Next.js, okay? And you will see that we have a tool on the left called Uniform, right? Uniform is a third-party tool, which is not a Sitecore one and not a Next.js one, right? Built by ex-Sitecore employees, right? And what it does is quite interesting, right? So Sitecore is a different kind of headless CMS, right? The classic headless CMSs basically are, I would say, a library of contents, right? So like a database of contents, okay? But Sitecore, what's interesting with it, it gives you can even have your page structure defined in Sitecore. You have personalization rules defined in Sitecore. You have A/B testing defined in Sitecore. Okay, so with Sitecore and the headless part, we can leverage that. And Uniform, and as its name suggests, basically did that part for us. So the connectivity between Sitecore and Next was done very seamless, right? And we didn't even have to worry about how do I bring the presentation detail into Next.js so I get the page structures. Uniform did that for us, right? So once this was done, so we plug Sitecore with Next using Uniform in the middle, and a build was run. We get into that again after. So the pages were kind of generated in static, okay? So static server rendering. And then we push the static page. This is where the magic happens, to a CDN, right? The CDN that we chose was Netlify, okay? Sorry. One of the reasons of Netlify is that it's not a typical CDN, like a classic base CDN, right? Usually we use a CDN to host just images, so assets, videos, right? So Netlify gave us this capability, right? To push and to host our website, our static page there, right? So it gives us additional capabilities, which Sarfaraz will get to later on in the webinar, right? Like invalidation of CDN itself, like doing redirections on the edge, okay? So, and the user, so the user who browses the site, they never hit Sitecore, right? They never ever hit Sitecore website. They hit Netlify, right? And Netlify, as it's a CDN, by nature, they scale, right? CDN is close to you, they scale out by nature, and it's very, very fast. So it's basically fast, that's what we got. So the next slide, please, Joe. So the next one is a bit more detail about the architecture. So on the left, you can see the servers that we set up on Sitecore. You have the content management, right? You have one build server, which we set up. I'll get into that. And we have a content delivery server, right? So from the content management, a webmaster, a content offering does their changes. What we set up was an auto-publish job on Sitecore. So every 2 hours, the site gets published, right? And all the sites, I mean, right? So the 90 plus websites get published. And what happens there is that it hits the build server. It's still Sitecore server, okay? So on a publish event, we call a build hook on Netlify. So Netlify knows that a publish has happened, so that it needs to build our site, okay? And this part, we don't manage it, right? So Netlify has their hook and stuff like that. We just make a call to the hook, right? So the hook knows, so Netlify knows that there's a change that publish has happened. What it does, it just fetches the content from Sitecore, okay? Straight the latest content that has been published. Basically, for one site, it takes all the content because Jamstack is atomic when you build the content. It takes the latest code depending on your branching model. Obviously, your master branch or release branch, right? It gets those, it builds it, right? So the build happens on Netlify as well. We build a script, the developers build the scripts, but Netlify hosts it and runs it, right? And then pushes it to their different website. So the different CDN endpoints, and the user uses Netlify routing and hits those as well. One important thing to note is that with the static generation, you have what we call real-time live data. Okay, so in our case, in Klepierre, right, for example, the opening hours of malls, the closing and opening hours of malls, right, they are kind of the changes, right, the changes in real time. So we can't expect a static build to fix that. So like we build a site, we build all the sites every day at a specific time, right? So it wasn't supposed to work like that. So we build some APIs, okay, on Sitecore headless. So this one, it hits the CD environment of Sitecore, and on React, right, and the front end part, we just call the APIs, and then just display to the user on the static page there. Next one, Joe. Yeah.
All right. If you don't mind, Zyad, I'll shoot on this one. So we also wanted to talk a bit about how we're doing personalization in this Jamstack kind of, Jamstack, but also scale context. So in this context, as you know, we have Sitecore. So one of the options was to use Sitecore to deliver personalization, which definitely is an option in different ways. One way would be to actually leverage the goods, the good old Sitecore personalization with XDB and everything. The issue is that having chosen Netlify, Uniform, and everything, we wanted to have high-level performances, and as soon as we go back to using Sitecore as the origin for personalization, we knew that this wouldn't work. In terms of performance, we would degrade the performance quite drastically, and also we would probably have to worry about scaling up on the Sitecore server side. So that's not what we wanted to do. So we had our approaches. Another solution was to leverage Uniform, because Uniform is offering this possibility as you're using Sitecore, or by the way, all the CMSs, but in the case of Sitecore, it's enabling you to actually have your personalization happening in different ways. One of the ways could be to define the personalization rules on Sitecore CMS itself, and then Uniform is able to fetch those personalization rules and run the rules themselves on the edge, together with Netlify. So the big difference here is that as you are doing that, you're not forcing every single visitor to go back to Sitecore servers to figure out, so that the server would figure out what content to deliver to them. So the content selection and the rule execution is happening at the front end level. So that really respects the whole thinking of Jamstack and performance. That's one way to do it. That's not exactly what we did, because as I said, this platform is not just a content platform. There is a lot of aspect of this platform which is about data. And one of the aspects is that we are using Tedium as a customer data platform. And this solution is enabling us to capture all the behavioral data, pretty much just like you would do with XDB, but in a much more flexible data, and much more in a way which is much more easy to leverage across different systems, not just Sitecore. And in this case, we are using Tedium to capture every single behavior, and we are able to actually associate visitors to profiles. We can call that audiences, for example, and say that behavioral audiences. So we could figure out that someone is pretty much interested into men's shoes, for example, and then we can actually personalize for them in that way. So what we're doing in our case is that we're using this information, this behavioral information coming from Tedium, is being exposed on the website on the front end, not server side. And then with Uniform, you are leveraging this data together with the business rules, which are also fed into Uniform, as well as the set of content. And the set of content here is a JSON, basically, which comes from Sitecore in a static way. So what we are doing here with Uniform is effectively to be able to decouple this whole personalization thing, instead of having one big thing, which is actually doing the whole presentation aspect of things, but also executing on the rules and pulling the content. Then you have all those things being split apart, and Uniform is putting them together and executing all the stuff, on the front end level. So this actually enables us, as we're speaking, we have personalization live on all the websites actually of Klepierre. But even before we have personalization activated, we are not seeing any kind of degradation on the performance clouds of the website. So this is really, from our perspective, but also from the client perspective, a great achievement. So yeah, so that's one of the the big gains as well of going to this type of infrastructure. We also wanted to talk a bit, we've talked a lot about what we have done, how we did it, but how did we actually make this happen? The first thing, of course, is we've talked a lot about the technology, but of course there is a team behind it. And here, of course, this is only a small snapshot of the team. This is actually the development team. As you can see, it's not like we don't have 100 people to deliver 100 websites that you can guess, right? Because we're using the right technologies here. We are having the right experts to be able to do all the things around, content migration to JSS, React.js, everything is here with the team that you can see here. Of course, there is more to this with, people doing the creative work, etc. But effectively, this is the kind of team that we pulled together to deliver this on the technology side. And we are really proud to have this team with us, because this is really coming together with the technology. It wouldn't be possible with the right team and the right, dynamic between the teams as well. But as we had the team pulled together, we also had to look at how do we actually deliver? How do we make it happen? So the way we did that is that we took the requirement, and the first thing we did was to launch a content platform, right? So we wanted to make sure that the digital properties were live, timely. We're talking about 6 months to have all the 98 websites live as content platforms. And this actually worked well. And then we added things like customer data. We added customer identity management solution based on Azure. After that, we also added the CRM aspect of things. We're using Selligent as a marketing automation solution. We're now working on a loyalty program, and we're having a lot more incremental innovations which are coming as well. We have launched a chatbot and many things on top of the platform. And one of the very important aspects of things here is that even though we have been, upgrading this platform on the go for so long, we have not seen a single day where we had, the website being down. And this is a very big achievement from our perspective. And this is something that was allowed mainly thanks to the technology set that we have chosen, and also, of course, to the, all the configuration that happened around it. But effectively, we are talking about a platform which has been live since January 2020, and for which we have not seen any single day of, a website going down out of the 90+ websites that we have. So this is a huge achievement, which is enabled by, all the CI/CD being perfectly automated, the deployment being, zero downtime, etc. And I'm sure that Zyad will talk about this a bit later. But yes, we wanted to share with you that the kind of phased approach that we took to make this happen. And now that we have talked about everything that Proximity has done, I want to give the voice to Sarfaraz to talk a bit about Netlify and the role of Netlify in this ecosystem.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Zyad, for sharing kind of, what were the key concerns as you went through this project and kicked it off, and how you approached it from a architecture perspective. I wanted to spend a few minutes here just sharing what changes when you take on this type of approach with Sitecore, and then also Netlify's role in a project like this. And then, following my section, we're still going into the actual outcomes. We'll send it back to Zyad and Jonathan. I know everyone wants to know at the end of the day, what were the outcomes and what did we achieve, after this change. So just stay tuned to that. So I think it's really important to understand as you think about taking Sitecore in a decoupled, in a Jamstack solution. How does it look like? The best way to understand it, the difference is really looking at it from a user's web request perspective. So if we look at the traditional Sitecore stack at the top and from left to right, when a user visits the website, there are a lot of systems involved. There's CDN, load balancer, web servers, and other. And each request, even with CDN, even with caching at each layer, all these systems are involved. And over time, it limits your ability to double your traffic or 10x your traffic or go to multiple regions across the world. What we're trying to achieve with a Jamstack approach with Sitecore is more like the bottom, where a user visits the website and we're essentially serving the entire application from the edge, from a location that's closest to the user, and we're not having to go through Sitecore. So there's two things that are different here. Number one is Sitecore is not part of delivering the actual web page. So a web request doesn't go to Sitecore, and Sitecore is no longer the origin. And that's the change number one. Change number two is the role of the CDN now it's a little bit different than what a traditional CDN is in terms of large content or image delivery. There's a lot more that the CDN has to do to be able to support this type of architecture. Now, the outcomes are that you can scale better. So if you double your traffic or 10x your traffic, you're not limited by other systems that would be in the flow, rather that you are able to take on that type of traffic. And the security posture is a lot stronger, where we have less systems involved as well. Now, Netlify's role in adopting this type of architecture is that we have optimized infrastructure. We're going to provide all the infrastructure that allows your organization to adopt this architecture. And so let me outline some of the key areas around that. So the first is that is the Netlify Edge. That's the high performance static front end that you would need, that allows you to decouple the front end from the back end. And when we say allows you, it's because the CDN will be doing a lot more. Jonathan and Zyad mentioned that they have 98 sites. So when a user is visiting from France and they want to see the English page of the site, but they're in France, how do we have redirects and routing set up so that you can do that and do that at scale and make it very easy? So there's a lot of there's other additional software that's running at the edge, and Netlify allows you to do that. The other key part is all the processing that we talked about. It doesn't magically disappear. What we're doing, instead of processing it at web request time, we're pre-processing, pre-building the entire pages. So there, you need a build environment as well. Netlify provides that build system and CI/CD. This is the time when we are talking to the uniform and Sitecore APIs. We're getting the content and we're pre-building that site. The only difference now is we're doing that processing and building on our time, rather than at the web request, which is when the user is actually visiting the site. And lastly, the third area is the dynamic content and personalization that's going to be happening, and additional business logic that is now in APIs and microservices. So Netlify provides a whole set of primitives with Netlify functions. These are AWS Lambdas. We have long running background functions. We also have edge handlers, which is logic that can run at the edge, especially for personalization, A/B testing. And so making it very easy to have the dynamic and personalized experience. No one really wants to run a website that is just a simple static brochure. So to be able to achieve that, you need this this area as well. The interesting part here is that now the browser essentially becomes the controller, where the user requests are being served from JavaScript and from the browser. And so you need to be able to have the infrastructure that can really work in this type of environment. And that's really the initial role of Netlify, is all that infrastructure that you would need to take on this type of approach. In addition to that, there's more of the cultural aspects. There's more about the people and processes that you need. So one thing is just having the right infrastructure. The other part is, how do you actually build these sites? How do you manage these sites? And what type of outcomes can you achieve there? So with Netlify, there is a workflow. It's really geared towards front-end developers. It's a Git-centric workflow. So developers can commit code in Git, and all the steps that they run are continuing in Git, but our workflow is really optimized for a front-end developer experience, including things like the automation that's required when we build these sites, having previews for every deploy, and then just having it very simple, where all the sites are globally distributed as well. We also allow for teams to collaborate better, and so that means developers, designers, marketing teams, your clients. How can we have everyone collaborate better in how you're working? Each branch, each pull request, it's its own URL. We can start previewing and seeing progress against that. And then there's additional capabilities where we have an entire ecosystem of plugins. And so teams need to have automated performance monitoring, application performance monitoring, security checks, lighthouse checks. These types of things we make it very easy for in a Jamstack environment, even though we're thinking about static sites, but making sure that all the best practices of software development are there. And then Netlify is a managed service. We are abstracting away the complexity of either trying to wire up serverless CI/CD yourself. This is AWS documentation around that, but we're really trying to not have the necessary DevOps investment that you would need in trying to do it yourself on a different path. So we are a managed service. Everything's already wired up, and we're trying to take away the complexity of even thinking about a caching strategy, replication strategy, so that you don't have to run a CDN yourself. Rather, Netlify is already doing that. We are using AWS and Azure and Google under the covers, so we're using the best in class, but really simplifying it for DevOps team, but then also for development teams we simply want you to be able to deploy more with zero downtime. And so a lot of the outcomes that we're seeing, especially around Sitecore, is you don't need to have big deploys only once a week, where multiple people are getting involved, or you have to take down the site while you're doing it. Rather, Klepierre and Jonathan and Zyad and team, they've been able to implement in such a way that Klepierre is deploying multiple times a day. The builds are fast. Even things like rollbacks can be instant. Cache is invalidated instantly as well. So a lot of those complexities now we're solving, and that's in addition to the core architecture. And it's really the best tool for developers. So a lot, there's a whole UI, there's a whole dashboard of how you manage sites, how developers can manage team members. We want them to be independent, to have their own sandbox and local environments, but then know that as they're developing code, that the best practices would be there around continuous delivery and deploys. The outcome that we're trying to achieve, and I think Justin Watts, who's a DevOps leader at Loblaw, one of the largest grocery chains in Canada, and I think he succinctly mentioned this, that Netlify empowers our engineering teams to launch websites and campaigns in minutes with no ops. Really, essentially, what has been a pipe dream for a lot in the industry, we've been able to help organizations achieve that. And so, Netlify's role in this is, if you want to take on this type of architecture with Sitecore, we're the technology partner that allows you to do that. And, simply it's a managed service, and you won't have to count boxes and regions and servers anymore, like you've had to do in the past with Sitecore. And so it's already multi-cloud with multiple top-tier cloud vendors in there. And our service includes all the environments. So production, sandbox, development, UAT. You don't have to recreate your production infrastructure just for your developers. Is already included, and it's global. So all the regions and zones, it will scale as your traffic spikes. So you don't have to reserve capacity in advance of holiday or Christmas or any events that your marketing teams are doing. And then really the main difference is that it's optimized for a Jamstack solution, and we're making it very easy for developers to work with us. Now, I think one of the things that we mentioned is, with Sitecore, there's a big ecosystem around Sitecore, and there's a lot of, long expertise that has been developed in the market. So we do count on Sitecore experts, and so Proximity and Jonathan and Zyad and team. I mean, more than 24 global offices and dozens of Sitecore experts and MVPs. And so implementation partners, we have a set of implementation partners like Proximity who can be your core Sitecore experts on Jamstack. And at the same time, we have a technology partner in Uniform. It's built by ex-Sitecore people. Uniform is essentially the bridge. You can take your Sitecore language and translate it into a way that it can work on Netlify and Jamstack. So what you end up with is you still have your Sitecore CM, your authors and editors will still use Sitecore just like they use it today, and you get all the benefits of the DXP experience there, but we're really changing what happens on the front end for the actual websites themselves. And Uniform is the bridge, Netlify is the build environment as we're going from right to left. The key difference being Netlify is going to serve the entire application. We're moving the entire web application to the CDN, to the Netlify Edge. And when a user visits the website, we're able to serve the entirety of the web application just from the edge there, rather than having Sitecore being part of that loop. The use cases that we are able to support, it can be a new implementation or an existing Sitecore site. Most commonly, we're seeing corporate site marketing sites, but also high traffic landing pages and campaigns. Your front end teams have the flexibility to use different technologies and frameworks now on the front end. So it can, React, and in this case, the team used Next. You can also use Nux. We do support, it'll support personalization, and you can use personalization on high traffic sites as well. And then, the most modern Sitecore versions are fully supported. Now, it is one thing to have the right architecture, to use your favorite tools and have the right tools selected. But, any of us and all of us, we're working at organizations where we are trying to deliver larger outcomes. And I wanted to send it back to Zyad and Joe. Let's hear about the outcomes and the impact of, as you went through this project and you delivered it, what were you able to achieve in terms of taking on this architecture? And we've talked so much about the architecture, but I know we're all interested in hearing more about the impact of it itself.
Yes, Joe, can you share the next one, please? Yeah. So just, no, you're the one before, yeah, good, thanks. So just before we get into the results, right, of what we achieved, wanted to quickly touch base on some of the learnings, right? So we went through to get to where of the results we had. So as most of you know, right, one of the main capabilities of Sitecore is the whole multi-tenancy of it, multilingual and multi-tenancy, right? So once we started that, we started actually on Sitecore 9, right, 9.0, right? And we found out that at that time, Sitecore 9 did not support multi-tenant for Headless Sitecore, which was surprising for us, right? So basically, Sitecore fixed that in Sitecore 9.2 onwards. Okay, so on top of the GSS, there's a need to install SXA core, right, to be able to have the multi-tenant capabilities of Sitecore, right? And this is, when we say multi-tenancy here, is just the backend part of it, the CM part. So you can create your site, you can configure your different URLs, and all of those kind of stuff, right? But still, we needed to have one separate web app per market. So on the left, for example, here, site 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? We needed to have several dedicated web apps, Azure web apps in our case, to be able to serve the headless part. And this is where Netlify, right, was kind of a godsend to us, right? And basically it remains the same, but Netlify, because they build and they push to their CDN endpoints, will kind of leverage their whole serverless approach. So we did not need to think about what kind of server we needed, how many web apps we needed, right? So we just pull the content, build it in static, and just pushes it to Netlify. Netlify, what they do, they just build the servers, and this does not, we don't even care about this, us developers, I mean, right? So Netlify took this whole part out of us. Okay, so that's one of the big learnings that we had. So be careful when doing Sitecore Headless on 9.2, right? You need to think about the infrastructure part as well very carefully. Next one, Joe, please. So one very important thing that we mentioned, right? So is that initially, okay, once we decided to go with Netlify, the whole setup, we were thinking, right, that just one server on our end would do the whole infrastructure, apart from Netlify, right? So we had one server managing the build. So what does this mean is that the whole build server takes content from Sitecore, takes the code and build the site and pushes to Netlify. We had the content API to serve real-time data, information, and the content management as well. So we had this just in one server. And obviously, right, as you imagine, we pretty soon had performance issue. So our new arrangement, so we separated those concerns. So we have one specific build server. What it does is just the build, but it also does the Sitecore publishing task as well. We have one server, which represents the content delivery one. It just manages and serves the content API, and one content management server, just for mastering and offering. But one important thing is that we just today, right, we just have 3 servers on our end, on Azure, okay? 3 web apps, I would say, on our Azure that manages the whole 90+ website that we are serving. And this is where Netlify helped us, right, to scale it automatically and naturally. Okay, next one, Joe. So one of the things that we wanted to achieve, right, is very high lighthouse scores. Okay, once we started the whole engineering, right, we pretty soon found out that the whole Jamstack Netlify stack is not the I would say the bulletproof silver lining that magically gives us everything, right? So there is a real need to have proper front-end engineering on your website to get proper scores of Lighthouse. Okay, one of the main things, right? The basic ones you guys must know, right? Like minimizing JavaScript, using CDN for assets, right? Those must be there. Low time to first byte, which Netlify gives us because of their CDN edge base. The main thing that we did, right, was to extend Next.js a bit, right? Because out of the box, Next.js loads their JavaScript, their external JS and stuff like that in async mode. So we had to defer them, right? And the next one we did, right, was to really lazy load the React components, right? Either through the page level, okay, or through when you're scrolling, the components loads at this moment in time. Those were the two main things that help us to jump from a score of, let's say, 60 to 90 plus mobile lighthouse, which is very, very rare in our world today, right? And that's the latest lighthouse, okay? On desktop, it hits 100, right? So on mobile, we are seeing 90, 95, 100, which is kind of amazing today. Okay, so that's one of the two things that main things that we did actually. And the next one, and Joe, is the build speed, right, of Netlify. Okay, so one of the things that Sarfaraz mentioned earlier was that today we are able to deploy whenever we like it, right? Whatever time, whenever we like. So to be able to achieve those, you need to be able to build your sites very, very fast. Okay, we were targeting like to build one site in 5 to 10 minutes, but we really got it like to 3 minutes, right, per website to build in parallel, right? So there's parallel build that happens. So what we did, right, to optimize the build time, so Netlify gave us a level of caching there as well. So if a site doesn't have any change, we still build it. It won't build it. It knows, right, that it has already been built and there's no change. So it caches it for us. You have parallel builds, all right? So we have 90 sites. We opted to build like 12 sites in parallel because we don't want to overload the build server as well, right? So we have 12 build happening in parallel. And for each build, you even have the level to manage the number of threads that happens, right? So how many calls that go to Sitecore, right, in parallel, okay? So you can go to 1, 4, 16, 32, 64, right? And you need to play with this to hit your sweet spot. So each website has different contents, different amount of contents to build, right? So you need to play around to know how many parallel builds work for you and how many threads you need to get that. Obviously, there's a need to optimize your Sitecore GraphQL queries, okay? So that the build server doesn't go down quickly. So basic things like Sitecore queries, like get children queries, for example, right? That doesn't parse the whole content tree to give you one item. So you need to think about this and cache those as well, okay? And one thing that because we are building sites that are every 2 hours, right? So we can't expect to build the 96 sites every 2 hours, right? What we did was that to only build the site that has content changes. So we have a Sitecore auto-publish job that runs every 2 hours, whatever happens, right? And then what we did was that we leveraged the Sitecore publishing queue, okay, to know which site has changes. And from this, we just triggered on Netlify the specific site that was going to be built, right? So basically, sometimes you just have 10 sites that are being built in parallel. So it goes very, very fast, actually, okay? And obviously, as I mentioned, we have a dedicated build server, which we boosted, not vertically, right? High CPU and to be able to get the performance needed. And then last but not least one is, as much as possible, there's a need for defensive coding, right? So we don't want, for example, to do a publish, okay? The site start building, and then we get a classic null reference error, right? Like a content in Sitecore is blank or null, but it's being referenced in the code, right? What happens is that the site start building, right? It takes time, and the build fails. So I need to go back, look at it, and then fix the content and start the build again, right? So whenever possible, right? Defensive coding, okay? Logging, log management. So you know what's happening. You build a site as far as possible, and then you diminishes your build cost drastically. Yes, next, Joe, please.
All right, so thank you, Zyad, for sharing all those learnings, because this is really important as we went through this journey. Because of course, today we have results, we have some decisions at the beginning, but really in the middle there was this whole set of things that we're not expecting, that were not working exactly as we wanted them to be, but we still have to get the results, and we are very happy to be where we are today, and the learnings that we got all the way is really important to us. Now let's look at the results that we get, because this is of course interesting, and we already shared a bit of this, right? You have seen what Zyad shared about, being able to hit very high scores on page speed. So what you're looking at here is very effectively, how the scores are netting up, for across the 98 websites that we have, and what we can see here is that it's very consistent. And effectively, we have been very pleased by this level of scores that we get. So much that we actually say to push the same type of architecture to some other platforms, which are scale platform as well, and we are observing the same scores as well, as long as we're following the same methodology in terms of coding, in terms of technology, etc. We are able to get there no matter what the scale is. Zyad also mentioned, the builds, which is really important. The time it takes to build, which is really amazing here. If we compare that with stuff that we have seen in the past, when using overbuilt solution like Azure, etc. This is really fast, and this really helping us, to hit the marks that we want to hit. And one other thing, I did mention this before, but Zyad, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, you can go back. I just wanted to mention here, right? So what you can see here on the screen is the deployed on the right, deployed in 3 minutes, right? So what does this mean, right? Is from publishing to Sitecore, okay, to getting the latest content, to building it in Netlify, right? And to invalidating the CDN as well. Netlify does that. So it's the whole end-to-end process. Imagine today, right, on classic CDN, just invalidating the CDN. It can take minimum 10-15 minutes, just this part, right? So I don't know how Netlify does it, but I don't want to know as well. So we deploy a site, right, like in 3, 4, 5 minutes, basically. Yeah, just wanted to mention this.
Thank you, Zyad. Looking at these numbers also, which are interesting because, from the, again, if you look at this from the customer perspective, this is really interesting. What we're saying is that even though we have been performing a lot of upgrades, doing a lot of different developments on top of the platform, we have not seen the website going down. And the scores that we are seeing here being extracted from Pingdom are talking to themselves. We are talking about high level, high availability here, 5 nines here, which is really interesting, not only for the business, but also for the IT. Talking about, making the IT happy as well, if we look at this one, which is, again, we started this whole story, Zyad started this webinar saying that the drive for us to go Jamstack was really the cost of infrastructure. What you're looking at here is how the cost of infrastructure has been evolving on Klepierre. What you're seeing here is that effectively in blue, this is the spend that we had available on Azure. In orange, what you're seeing is what we are consuming effectively. This was taken up back in June, but it's pretty much the same at this point in time. What we're looking at is really like we're not even using half of what we could, which is really good. It could also say, hey, we are overspending on Azure, but actually we have made decisions on our Azure setup before we decided for Netlify. Otherwise, probably we would go for something a bit lower. But anyway, here what we're saying is that we are in a very good situation to be able to control these very critical, infrastructure budget across the next couple of years, which is a very big point for our platform. So we have looked at all of this, all the how we did it, the team that we put together, the challenges that we face, the learnings and the results. Of course, from the customer perspective, there is also some very interesting things. Like if we look at the platform right now, of course, it's a platform which is, it's a digital platform that has, as we said, data and content being flowing, flawlessly across the whole ecosystem with APIs and etc. Personalization is there with performance. The content authoring as well is much easier than it used to be on the previous platform. But if you look at the last piece here on the right, what you're saying is that the content that we have on the platform today, which is created on Sitecore, is available not only on the websites, on the apps, on the chatbots, etc. But this very same content is being used in store, which is very interesting from the customer perspective, which is really what they want, where they want to go, like being able to bring the digital in store as well, and being able to capture some data as well from there. So this is one of the achievements as well from the client perspective that we're very happy about. So yes, thank you everyone. So this is what we wanted to share. This is our story about how we built this scaled platform on the DXP, but also using Jamstack for Klepierre. And yeah, let's switch to Q&A if you have any question.
Very good. Thanks, Jonathan, Zyad, for sharing the results there and just really the thoughtful overview. And I know this was kind of a big engagement for you all. And so I think just for us to be able to follow along the journey of how you started with Klepierre and how we're going to be able to go through the process was really helpful for us to learn. And Nate, looks like you shared the poll results. If you want to just quickly go over it.
Yeah, so looking over the poll results, it looks like the clear winner here is, when people are thinking about the biggest change they'd like to see in 2020, better page performance is the big winner, which makes a ton of sense and is definitely something that we see reflected in a lot of the people that we talk to who are looking at the Jamstack and Netlify. And second is easier infrastructure management, right? Just the process of making actually running these sites easier, more streamlined. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. I definitely think that's reflected in what we're seeing from a lot of other people as well. So thank you for sharing.
All right, wonderful. And I know we're at the top of the hour and we have folks from all over the world, Costa Rica, Philippines. So we'll try to be mindful, but I think we have time for at least maybe one or two questions. And so, we'd love to get Zyad and Jonathan's opinions on some of these thoughts as well. I think one question coming in from Abhinaba is, how much of a performance improvement was achieved using Jamstack? I think the actual performance differences, I think, were already shared. But my thought, Joe and Zyad, is I think the architecture helps unlock the potential when the Sitecore is not really part of that request, and you have a pre-built site that really unlocks the potential of getting high performance and scalability. But in a project like Sitecore, I would say that layering on the right technology with the business expertise is really important, because you need those experts in the room who can actually deliver the final thing. Like, it's not something you can just wire on your own without that expertise of underlying Sitecore, how it works. But I'm curious your thoughts. I mean, you had to be very thoughtful of even your team structure. Which offices are you getting expertise from and people involved? Maybe could you speak a little bit to more, like, in addition to architecture and the Jamstack approach, what else is important for getting an outcome like this?
Yeah, so just for the results, what we would observe as well from a traditional Sitecore implementation, right? When headless, our time to first byte, right, which is the time the server responds. Okay, we usually in a Sitecore well-optimized environment, you get to 0.3 milliseconds, right? 0.3, 0.4. With Jamstack, we went to 0.1. So imagine that, right? 0.1, very, very high time to first byte. Okay, because of Netlify, because of the Jamstack architecture, because of the CDN, which is close to the user serving them, right? And of course, right, as I mentioned, if you want high lighthouse scores, this is very important, the time to first byte, but your front-end engineering is really important as well, how you architect your thing. Yeah. So.
Wonderful. And I think one more question coming in from Ansar is, how do we manage calls to Sitecore, as we only have a limited Sitecore servers? So I think, Zyad, you touched on it a little bit in terms of the infrastructure that you're running now for Sitecore. Because web traffic's not coming in, you're okay having limited Sitecore servers in this context, right?
Yeah, so because we call Sitecore, we made the call to Sitecore just on the builds, right? So not at scale. So if I have 1,000 people, for example, coming on the site, I don't have 1,000 call to Sitecore, right? And this is how we mitigate it. So it's only done at the build time. And what's interesting is that when it's done at the build time, so the developer, so the architect knows how many calls will happen. So it's controlled, right? So then they can look at how they scale the servers if needed. Sometimes it's needed, right, to scale the build server. but you have control over it. Okay.
Let me add to this because Zyad, I believe you did mention during the conversation that we do have a CD server, right, for APIs, because as we said, not everything is static. Not everything is going to be static. We have some things which actually need to be live. In the case of shopping centers, one of the things they want to really be live, like the opening hours, they don't want this to be cached. So in those cases, we need to have an API server on the Sitecore end, and we need to have this server being responsive as well. And that's really why the reason why Zyad has taken at some point the decision to split, the servers that we have on the Sitecore end, to have one server dedicated to build, one server dedicated to APIs, and the last one, which is more for CM, for content authoring. So I think it is very important to keep this in mind, that you still need to have your Sitecore servers to at some point be available for production for live users. But here the scope is very drastically different compared to what you would use Sitecore servers for usually, because you're not the origin, you are just serving for APIs for the few things which are really live. So it's very important to understand that as well.
Yeah, which means that your Sitecore queries, right, your Sitecore code should be best in class as well, right? So you need to be fully optimized.
Very good. Well, thank you for that, for answering those questions. There's a few more questions coming in, but unfortunately we just won't have time to get to those. So we'll follow up separately with folks who are asking. Zyad, Jonathan, I want to thank you for taking the time, for walking everyone through this project and the outcomes that you achieved. And just for the audience, Proximity, they are a Netlify Global Alliance agency partner, and Proximity Worldwide being a network of more than 24 agencies, and Zyad's from Proximity Indian Ocean, Jonathan is from Proximity Paris. A lot of Sitecore experts that are there. If you are looking to do a project with Sitecore, you want to learn more about what it takes, you can reach out to me. We'll send the information over email for everyone who attended, and we can get you in touch with Zyad and Jonathan and team as well, and learn more about what you're working on. But we'll end it with that, and thank you everyone for attending, and again, Jonathan and Zyad for just sharing your experience with all of us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.